York's classic rock, Q1043.
Okay, welcome back. Jonathan Clark in the studio, joined by a multiple Grammy nominee. You know him, of course, from his prolific works from both Porcupine Tree and his many solo albums. The current solo album, right here, that we like to hold up, To the Bone. He is on tour now, including 2 sold-out shows, sold out unless you know somebody, I guess, at the PlayStation Theater in Times Square here in New York City this coming Saturday and Sunday night. He is Steven Wilson. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming by.
Pleasure.
This tour, I've been checking it out. These shows are really multimedia extravaganzas. I mean, that's an old term, but it really applies to this show that you're doing. I was watching the mini doc on the tour on the website, and it looks amazing. It's not just lights and screens. It's a lot more than that.
Right. I think for me, I've always felt like putting on a live show is something almost analogous with creating, a piece of cinema or something. You want to kind of take the people that come to the show, you want to take them on a journey. You want to give them an incredible audio experience, of course, but you also want something that's going to hold their attention because the show's long. It's like 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
Sometimes 3 hours. So, and I think also, these days, well, firstly, my music there's a lot of storytelling going on in the songs. So it seems logical to kind of extend that to actually the visual side.
Right.
But I think also these days you have to acknowledge, if you're a rock musician like me, you have to acknowledge that there's so many people out there touring.
Oh, yes.
That's what rock guys do now. We don't make records. Well, we do, but that's only part of it. What we do now is we go out and tour. So there's more people out there touring than any other time in history, arguably in the history of rock music. So it's almost like you have to do something really extraordinary.
Are there holograms? Are there lasers going on?
Yeah, not lasers, but there's holograms. There's a screen there's like an opaque screen that kind of hangs in front of the band that you don't see.
Yeah.
But it's there,
right.
And I can project images onto that screen. So it's a very immersive experience.
And this is a lot of production for. It's not an arena. I mean, you're playing big places, but it's not, say, 20,000 people. In some places, it's a few thousand.
Exactly.
But you're really blowing it out with the.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying. It's almost like, even though I'm operating at a lower level than perhaps an artist like Roger Waters or Muse who do these amazing shows, I feel like I'm doing something that's going to make people want to come to see my show rather than someone else's show because it is a spectacle.
It's crowded out there.
Yeah, it is very crowded.
His name is Steven Wilson. The new album, To the Bone, on tour now, Saturday and Sunday night, this weekend in New York City at the PlayStation Theater. I want to ask you if you have watched the XTC documentary, This Is Pop.
I was invited to the premiere.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
How great was that?
I thought it was fantastic, and I'm so happy that band finally gets some recognition.
Yeah. And he actually wrote the lyrics to the opening track on this album.
Andy Partridge. He wrote the lyrics to the Bone. In fact, he came up with the title of the album because it was his lyrics to the Bone, which I stole for the title of the album.
So you're obviously friends with him. So what does Andy do now?
Andy, let's just say that Andy is now at a point in his career which I think a lot of artists get to, is that he spends most of his time curating his back catalogue.
Oh, okay.
So you get to a certain point in your career where there's so much stuff in the past that I could do this now if I want. I got a lot of records too. If I wanted to, I could quite happily sit at home and just curate, reissuing, remastering, repackaging. And I think Andy's quite happy to do that now. He's looking after his legacy, and it's an extraordinary legacy.
It is. And that was a great documentary. It just really makes you want them to tour again. I'm sorry, but it
won't happen.
Yeah, I know. You just mentioned this. Porcupine Tree, I think, did 10 albums. You have done, this is, I think, your 5th solo album, I believe. Mm-hmm. So that's 15 albums right there. But how many albums did you participate in or work on? Because I was looking at it, you're approaching like Steve Lukather Toto status at this point. You're on so many other records.
I've never counted, but there's a guy in Germany who put together this thing called the Steven Wilson Discography, and I think it had everything I'd ever done, everything I'd ever played on, everything I'd ever mixed. Every compilation album that one of my songs had ever appeared on. I think it ran to 720 pages.
Oh my God.
It is insane.
That is insane.
It's an amazing, I use it all the time. If I can't remember what track I did or what album it's on, it's an amazing document. So that gives you just an inkling, and that's all probably already out of date as well.
Yeah. So you said recently, the great thing about being a solo artist is that you get to pick a sort of revolving cast of excellent musicians that you can bounce off creatively. Whereas, say, with one band, those sort of things sort of dwindle after a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being a solo artist, you get to like vibe off new people, right?
I think that's, if you look at someone like David Bowie, that's what he was very good about. He was always the same, but he was very good at changing the people around him to give him, freshen his sound up. And one of the things I think that's really nice about being in a band is you do have that consistency of sound. But ultimately, if you're someone that's very creative and likes to do different things, that ultimately becomes a little bit restrictive. I can't change myself, but I can change all the people I work with.
Right.
And that's one of the beautiful things about being a solo artist.
And then David Bowie's albums from one to the next were all completely different.
And I think part of that was that he was always choosing his collaborators very carefully, very smart guy.
A lot of your albums follow a particular theme. Many are straight up concept albums. Do you define that theme or concept before you go into the studio, or does it all sort of happen?
I don't look for concepts. This To the Bone, for example, is not really a concept album, but sometimes concepts present themselves to me. It's like I said to you earlier, I like the idea of, the show almost being like a piece of cinema. I feel the same way about the album. It's an opportunity to tell a story across a longer form, like a novel or a piece of cinema. And I don't go looking for stories, but sometimes they present themselves. The previous record, Hand Cannot Erase, had a very strong kind of narrative concept that ran through it. And that just kind of presented itself to me one day. I was watching TV. I saw this amazing news story about a woman who had passed away in London and her body hadn't been discovered for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And that set me off thinking, we live in the age of the internet, we live in the age of Facebook, we live in the age of social media, we're all supposedly connected. And of course, the opposite is very often the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the truth, yeah.
One track on the album that some may see, I guess, not expect from you is a track called Permanating.
Right.
The video is fantastic, and I'm curious about the dancers. Are they Indian?
Bollywood.
Bollywood
dancers, yeah.
Oh, really? Well, tell me about that track, Permanating.
So Permanating has been a little bit controversial with my fan base. I don't think not because it's relatively straightforward for me, but because it's incredibly joyous.
Yeah.
And people associate my music very much with melancholia and the sort of darker side of life, which is, and I totally understand why that should be. But I also have always had in my musical DNA a love of great, joyful pop music. I grew up in a house where my mum and dad listened to ABBA, the Bee Gees Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. And
Can't go wrong there, man.
Yeah, exactly. And in a way, I've always found that music as magical as the more kind of intellectual, conceptual rock music. But for whatever reason, as a musician, I've always tended towards the latter. So the kind of more joyous pop side hasn't come out so much. But for whatever reason, this time it did. And I was so proud of this song. I couldn't wait to release it into the world, partly because I knew it was going to upset some of my hardcore fans.
Hey, you got to change. You can't do come on. You got to be creative,
Exactly. And I think going back to that Bowie thing, part of being an artist, if I can pretentiously refer to myself as an artist, part of the deal of being an artist is you confront the expectations of your audience. You don't simply cater for them, you constantly confront them. And you expect to lose some fans along the way. And listen, I expected to lose some fans. I expect to lose fans with every album because I'm always changing. But that's part of the deal.
Hey, Linkin Park came out with this completely top 40 album, the last album they came out with. And
really?
Everyone was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then, but I love that song. And that song, Permanating, you know what? It's like a good driving song, I think. You pop that in the car and you take a little road trip. Is it true, and I have to ask you this because I found it sort of hilarious. Actually, Andrew found this. This Spanish fan journalist took a trip just to tell you that he didn't like the album or something?
Yes.
Well, that's a lot of money to spend just to,
Well, in a way, it's flattering because it shows how passionate people have become about me and my music and my career. And he was so affronted, particularly by the song Permanating. He wrote for a magazine called Metal Hammer. That maybe gives you a clue about where his musical
of course,
inclinations were. He wrote for a magazine called Metal Hammer, and he flew to London as part of a sort of press junket I was doing to basically tell me how much he hated the record, how much his girlfriend hated the record, how much his friend hated the record. And in a way, as I say, in a way that's kind of flattering because, he obviously cared deeply. He cared enough about me and my catalogue to want to fly all the way to tell me I'd done something wrong in his view. Now, of course, to me, that was a really good sign.
Yeah.
Because if you're not upsetting people, you're not upsetting some of your fans. Listen, I don't go out of my way to upset my fans. But I think it's, like I say, it's part of the deal that if you're upsetting your fans, you're changing, you're revolt, you're doing something different.
I have a funny feeling that the next time you play his hometown, he's going to be at your concert.
Well, he will be. And you know what? Also, I reckon probably the album will have grown on him by now.
Yeah.
Because one thing I'm finding is a lot of people who were the most resistant to a song like Permanating, that song, every single night when I play that song, that gets the most incredible reaction of the whole night.
That's like a dance song almost, right?
Well, it's amazing to see these guys that, with the Pink Floyd, the King Crimson T-shirts, are sort of sitting there, when I say we're going to do it, they're sort of sitting there looking grumpy when I'm sort of talking about we're going to do Permanating now. By the end of the song, they're all up and dancing.
Of course they are. And I have to talk about this Guardian headline. And I'm sure you've seen it. It says, the prog rocker topping the charts without anyone noticing. And you've described yourself as sort of invisible in the mainstream. Do you ever wish you were more or less famous? Or are you cool because you can just roll up to the Royal Albert Hall and play multiple sold-out shows and just off you go and drive off?
Well, look, I think the reality is that anybody that makes art, whether it's music or movies or books or paintings or whatever they do, that they really believe what they do is something special, then it's very natural to want to share that with as many people as possible. Now, if you have an obstacle in the way, which we'll call mainstream media, which I do, mainstream media have been very resistant to me, and I understand why. I don't have a chip on my shoulder. Okay, a little bit maybe, but basically, mainstream media have been this barrier between me reaching a large audience. Now, I don't think what I do is particularly difficult.
No.
Okay, it's not mainstream pop, but there's enough melodies, there's enough that's very accessible about the music that I believe there is a potentially very large audience out there.
Yeah.
So there is this frustration when you're unable to reach the potential of that audience. And the best way I can describe it is this, is that everyone that likes music already has decided, they've had the opportunity to decide whether they like Radiohead or whether they don't like Radiohead, because everyone's had the opportunity to hear Radiohead.
Now more than ever, yeah.
So they've decided, yes, I like Radiohead, I don't like Radiohead. I would say 90% of the potential audience for rock music still don't know who I am, and so they haven't had that opportunity to decide whether they like my music or not. If they don't like it, that's fine, but I just want them to have the opportunity to hear the music, to decide whether they like it or not. That is a frustration, and I think that's a frustration that anybody that makes music or any art would feel. You know what I mean?
Well, we're here to change that, goddammit.
Thank you.
Anyway, Steven Wilson is his name, and the new album is To the Bone. He's playing the PlayStation Theater here in New York City this coming Saturday and Sunday night. Sold out. You can go all the tour dates on his website. You know what song I love on the album is Same Asylum as Before.
Oh, cool. Man.
Which does not sound anything like Permanating, but it's completely different. Tell me about that song.
I mean, the sentiment of the title really, in fact, it's quite topical really at the moment. It's basically the idea that it doesn't matter who you vote for, you're still stuck in the same madhouse, So it doesn't matter who we have ruling us, who's in government, we're still basically in this crazy place, So it's a very simple sentiment. What's interesting about this song for me, from a musical point of view, is on this album I've tried for the first time really to sing a lot in falsetto.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And part of that was because I spent most of 2016 listening to Prince. Prince passed away. Now, I grew up with Prince. Prince was my hero when I was a kid. Prince was the guy that was on my poster on my wall. And of course, one of the great things about Prince is he sang a lot of his greatest songs in falsetto.
Sure did, yeah.
So I spent a lot of 2016 when I was writing this record trying, this white guy from London, trying to sound like this funky black dude from Minneapolis. And I kind of went with it. And I don't know whether it works or not, but I enjoy it, and I sing this song in falsetto. So again, it's this idea of challenging myself, trying to do different things with each record. And that was one of the things I did with this record.
Give me your top 2 or 3 Prince songs.
Oh, wow. My favorite Prince song, which is something you guys here in America would call a deep cut, is a song on Sign of the Times called "The Ballad of Dorothy Parker." Do you know that song?
I've heard of it. I couldn't pick it out, but yeah.
It's amazing. And what I love about it is that, we were talking about the idea of songs that tell stories. It's a story song. It's a story, it's an amazing song. Very playful, as you'd expect with Prince. So this song is probably my favorite Prince song. I actually did a cover myself, and I still play this sometimes live, of the title track of Sign of the Times.
Oh, man, great.
Which again, very, 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 people don't give him a credit. He was actually quite socially aware, and he would sometimes write these songs that are very politically aware. Sign of the Times is one of those songs. So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite guitar solo on any of his songs? I like the end of Let's Go Crazy. That's mine.
Yeah, that's an amazing one. I mean, the obvious one, obviously, people always talk about Purple Rain, but I'll try and avoid the obvious. There's an amazing song he does called Joy in Repetition, and you can go on YouTube, and a lot of people, you'll see Prince most amazing guitar solo of all time, and it's usually this song called Joy in Repetition, where he would sometimes stretch out for 3 or 4 minutes playing this song.
Oh, man.
He was an incredible guitar player.
God, so good. Yeah. Stephen Wilson is his name. The new album is To the Bone, playing the PlayStation Theater here in New York City this coming Saturday and Sunday night. All the tour dates are on his website. I want to give you some rapid fire quick questions. You have to pick one or the other.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Yes or Gentle Giant?
You did say quick, didn't you? I'm gonna go Gentle Giant only because I think more people deserve to hear Gentle Giant.
Okay. The next one, Peter Gabriel or Phil Collins?
Peter Gabriel.
Genesis with or Genesis without Peter Gabriel?
I'm not a fan of Genesis, so you're asking the wrong person.
Okay.
Yeah.
XTC or the Cocteau Twins?
I have to say XTC. I love them both. This is a real difficult question, yeah.
Oasis or Blur?
Oasis, probably.
And Beatles or the Stones, obviously.
Again, I love them both, but it's got to be the Beatles, yeah. I'm a producer, so from a producer's perspective, the Beatles is like textbook.
Yes, yeah. It's like way up there in the heavens, right?
Yeah.
Stephen Wilson is his name. The new album, everyone go out and get it. It's fantastic. It's called To the Bone. And see him on tour in New York City. He'll be at the PlayStation Theater this coming Saturday and Sunday night. A great weekend with Stephen in New York City. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck on this tour. Stay safe, and please come back here anytime you want.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.